So this is only my maybe third Zoom class, maybe, and I did one on my own. It wasn't a total disaster, but it was pretty interesting. So I'm naive and I'm not very well trained. So I'll be looking to those of you that I recognize are really are experts. And so I'll be asking you stuff. But the first thing I wanted to start with is this flyer that Julia sent. And so I'm going to share my screen here so you can see that. And so here's what she sent us. And this just seemed like just perfect for us because she's sort of as a designer and somebody who's worked in the industry, she's been able to maintain contacts. And so when she does a presentation like this, it's going to be pretty up to the minute. And so I was hoping that, I guess we'll get her link for the video and take a look at that. So I'm not sure if you all got this, but I'll probably put it in, I may be able to put it in Canvas so you could look at it again. It's already gone by, but you can see what the topics are. But these would be things that are important to us. So we're looking at and thinking about our portfolios and our resumes. And there are several points of view on resumes. So we'll be talking about that for a while based on the resources that we look at. And so these are all some of the topics we are covering. So business cards and any identity, your logo, brand, all of those things that have to do with you are what this class is about. So I'm just going to tuck that back down there and stop sharing and come back to here. And just to, let me see what else I've got here. What I would like to do now is find out who all was able to go in and look at the resources that were in the announcements that were listed as due today, in that to be read today, so that you knew what they were and what they were about. And so that's something that I want to make sure we take a look at and get comments from all of you about any ideas that you have related to those sites. So I am going to be going into, I think I'm going to go into Canvas now, and you just get here, and I'm going to share my screen again. And go into Canvas. So this is the place I was talking about back in, at the beginning, where we get into announcements here. And before the class started, like last week, this was about
Beth, we're not seeing, Beth, I'm sorry, we're not seeing your screen.
Okay. I hit share screen.
It's that little green button at the bottom of the window.
I did hit it, and then there we go. Okay.
Oh, try it again.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Now we see it.
Okay, there you go. So this is preparation and assignment. So this is in our announcement. I hope some of you got in. This is sort of like for our first week was to get ready for class doing this. And then getting into here and looking at this part. I put due today because I kind of wanted everybody to be familiar with what's in here. So starting right off with AIGA, how many of you knew about AIGA before today, or before this class? So some of you. So let's, so AIGA is kind of the main organization in the country for design. And so looking at what all they have in here is, it's fairly busy on the first page, and they have when you go into these other pages, this is something to notice. You notice the white space and the lack of clutter. So the first page is a little busy because it's sending you to all those different places. But being aware of how this looks, and thinking about, I'm thinking about the project for next week. We'll be looking at examples from the last class of next week's project 1, which is about designing one page that explores and investigates and discusses your thoughts at this point, starting the class, of what you envision for yourself, what you want to accomplish, and that's going to be a little bit different for everyone. So showing these sites is a way of kind of investigating and being aware of what's out there and what the design world looks like. Kind of get in here. And so these are color coded. It looks kind of like one of the exercises we're doing in DM1 Photoshop right now, but where those colors are a part of what students are using. So these are the different areas that you'd be looking at, and depending on who you are. So it's important to know about resources and kind of follow along with what's happening in the field, so that you can sort of see a kind of a look and feel expectation, know how far out you can get to. People want to differentiate themselves and look a little different from the mainstream design, but not be poorly designed. So looking at figuring out what your own personal look and feel is going to be is part of what we're doing. So going back to their another page here. So these are resources to notice how people represent themselves. You're thinking about your mark, what it would be. It could be like one dot on a on a colored field of some kind. But this is part of what we're exploring, is what symbol or how you're going to represent yourself symbolically, because it could be in a favicon at the top of your web page, or it could be a lot of different reasons to design a mark. And we're going to be talking a little bit later on about how you can change your mark, so you don't have to feel pressured to stick with what you've got going on. What you decide in this class might change next week. So if you're looking at something like, I'm going to go over to Facebook. No. I'm going to go over to I'm going to go back here to our research topic. So you get an idea of what's happening with AIGA, and know that it's a good idea to check in with that. Had anybody heard of D School before this group of things?
If
So,
you're up, most people are muted. So if you're muted, you can unmute yourself and then speak.
so D School, anybody know about D School before today?
I don't think so.
Neither did I.
So here's D
I'd never heard of it before.
So D School is a really wonderful resource that you can explore and actually take a simple class. And it's the design school at Stanford that's a mixture of all kinds of disciplines. So I'm going to click here. And so this is the sort of thing that I was hoping you'd be able to get into before in the last week. So, but it's fine to start right now. So again, looking at the way the pages are designed, looking at the alignment and how the type is done, what the space looks like. So these are sort of setting a standard for the way you kind of want to think about not exactly representing yourself, but blending in with this kind of culture. So they can't do a long dash here, I guess. So we're at Stanford now, and we're doing what they do. So there are some people who have gone from like Crucible in Berkeley, that's a, a physical design center where people make a lot of things. The fellow who's there, Steve, and I can't remember his last name, has gone and he does. I don't think he went to Stanford, but a lot of people like him are going to places like this to do various classes and that kind of thing. So let's just scroll down here and see what. So they have classes for Stanford students, but also online they have a whole kind of adventure in exploring design, and some of the events are things that you can do even if you're not a Stanford student. So the D School, not too far away, and something that you can explore both online and as go back here. So D School, and a little farther away is IDEO. They're really far away, so it takes them a while to get up on the screen. So they're about everything to do with design and all kinds of design. So that, again, if you're thinking about blending into a certain area of design, like if it's product design or branding or designing things, designing, different kinds of kitchenware or something like that, cars, you want to be aware of IDEO because they sometimes have connections that can take you to places that connect you with the work that you might be planning on doing. So all of these different sorts of workshops and events that have to do with design and design thinking and working as a designer alone or working collaboratively, all of those kinds of opportunities are something that are discussed, and it looks like a little 3D going on, and almost almost everything is talking about the pandemic at this point. So people are, nobody's, uh, I was going to say immune, but I hope we're all immune. So everybody is involved with this. So let's go back to here. Then I have a subscription and have had a long relationship in terms of knowing a couple of people who have worked here and being kind of in love with their books, because they just get do some crazy things with books that are really wonderful, and they're funny. They have a whole kind of ongoing humor section online that you can go to. But they try to maintain a sort of classic look. And when you think about the look you want to have, if you want it to be kind of on the classic side, you'd be thinking about the type you'd be picking, and you'd start to get to know the classic types and how they look and how they could serve you and your way of presenting yourself. And the thing about McSweeney's is they have a lot of humor going on, so that in the context of having really elegant typography, they'll have something that's hysterically funny or just totally off the wall. So it's sort of a mixture of ways of looking. And of course, then there's the cover art. And this is their latest edition of stuff that is some of these. This one is the one that I came recently, and this book has 5 books inside. So this is the cover right here, and then you go in and they've got another book in here and another book in here. So there are 5 books all bound together, and they're all have all different topics. So if you're still into tactile physical world publishing, real publishing with type, well, not real world publishing with type, that's something to look at. We'll also look at how you can be in the publishing scene that's strictly online, and what you need to think about in terms of your design for that kind of a workplace or way of working, or an area of publishing and design. So let's go back to here. And then supportive groups that also have workshops, and they have a pricing guide that I don't have the latest one of, but they're sort of the place where you can figure out how to get a pricing guide and figure out how to price your work. And so in these times, being able to work with people like we are now, so that some of you with the most experience already have an advantage to being able to interact with your clients and be as creative in the way that you present yourself online and interacting with clients as you would be in a real physical setting. So all of those things are something to think about. And then once you decide on how you're going to be doing your design work, figuring out how to price it is always something that is a little bit challenging. And right now things are changing radically, so that we'll have even more that needs to be considered when we're thinking about that. But this is the resource, the graphic Artist Guild is the resource for a lot of the tools that are really helpful. So they have the resources here, and imagine one would have this. Okay. So it looks like they're having webinars too. Haven't been in here in a few days. So business practices, all of those kinds of things would be what you'd be aware of and should research so that you, when you're asking a question and I may not know the answer, these are places that I would go look, find out the answer. And so I want you to have and be aware of this so that you could be able to go and find out things on your own. So and I'm going to, this one I can't remember why I put it here, but I saw it and I thought this could be a good one. Yes, so this is an example of people who are making things and designing things, and just seeing that, looking back at all of the things we've seen, I would like for a couple of you to just say, what did you notice that they all have in common? What was something like looking at this one?
I'd say white space.
Lots of white space, exactly. So when you're preparing your work, I just looked through 79 applicants for the art photography candidates in the art photography department. They're one of the few jobs that remained after all of the budget cuts. There were several jobs that were Cabrillo jobs that were out there, but art photography and a couple of others stayed. And so I got on the committee for art photography so that I want to have a video program in conjunction with art photography. So I wanted to be there to help select the person who's going to be the full-timer in art photography. And so I saw 79 resumes, and I saw almost as many websites for all of the different candidates. And they're trying to make themselves stand out as being aesthetically with it. And so I was surprised at the lack of white space that I saw, and the too many things to look at, confusing people. And so we're going to be talking about portfolios. And your resume, overall, what I'm hearing is the resume isn't so important. It's more about the portfolio. Resumes are good to have, and some people will ask for them, but the portfolio is important. So here we're looking at these pages here, and these are individual representations of different aspects of this little thing going on there. So these are how these pages look. So, and typography, being really clear about typographic alignments and choices and tracking and kerning, all of those things get very real. And you would probably be working if you got a job for a company or an individual or a group or business, you would probably be doing anything that they had for print and what they have for the web. They may already have a web designer, in which case you would be coordinating with someone else and making sure that your design was consistent and represented the company. So this also has this swooping thing going on here that's kind of cool. So these are kind of like you're climbing out of the pool or something. There you go. Oh, okay. And so these different ways of looking at companies or entities, and then having it all consistent throughout, where the typography doesn't suddenly fall apart or get stock or default, that where it continues to be really good. And this is where, when you're doing typography like this, you would be wanting to take John's classes to be fully aware of what is happening with CSS and in the background for a lot of these sites, so that you can make the type do what you want it to, and you can make it flexible and responsive and all of those kinds of things. So it's almost impossible these days to just do print design. So print design is wonderful, and there's a call for it, but it's mainly about getting things online in a beautiful, effective, and responsive way. So there is that firstborn site that's less talk, more rock. Okay. And then this comes along all the time for all the different areas of design. So you can photography, illustration, typography, graphic design, motion media. Motionography, does everybody know what motionography is? Have you heard of motionography? Has anyone heard of motionography?
Is it like just animated GIFs and stuff, or?
It's a little bit like that. So it's a combination of stills and animation. And it's a new area that has a name. And that's it. And so it's some people have a feel for animation, and so this is animation in combination with a lot of other areas. So it's web and moving film. So we'll look at a little bit of that, but motionography is something to think about. So I'm going to click on this one. Is
We heard somebody.
Yeah, I think it's Eddie.
Hi.
Hi. So,
Eddie, do you have a question?
yeah.
I see that you're muted, but I think you know how to unmute yourself.
Am I muted?
No, we all hear you.
Okay, I thought you did.
When you ask a question, you should give people a few seconds to be able to unmute themselves, because
Okay.
sometimes people forget to do that.
Okay.
I guess Eddie didn't have a question.
I think he was just testing to see if his mic was working.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. So, so these are just agencies, and so this one, Landor. If you went back and look at the Landor mark, and I'm just going to do a screenshot of this and come back to it, because I have a couple of other marks that we'll take a look at that kind of go along with this. So we're going to be looking at brands and marks a little later on. Some are kept really simple. Some I have a really appealing name and a way of showing themselves. And this is one of my favorites, House Industries. These guys have come up from the hot rod, Von Dutch, Holland, and striping era to do house industries with elegant presentations of Keith ceramics and all manner of typography and new fonts and new fonts from old type designers. So looking at these marks, and Agenda's got a big chunk missing out of its A, which lets the air in. Gives it a little sense of lightness for all that, the rest of that heavy type in the magenta part. Code and theory. So these are mostly just marks that are, they're mostly type. So thinking about, and there's IDO, where we visited. So those are some things to be aware of. And that kind of what, that's the beginning of the resources that I have to share with you. There are many more, but these ones stood out as having a range of imagery and possibilities that I thought would be help you get started thinking about yourself, because the project one is about writing up a page about yourself and designing it. So let's see if I can, well, let's just go on to get into our next module. I'm not looking at the time. So John, can you be looking at the time for me?
Yeah, it's 3:12. You know, you can go a little longer. We can take a break whenever you want.
Okay, well, I'm going to look at project one.
Okay.
So project one is identifying, looking at yourself and looking at, after looking at other things out there, so that getting a good reality check about what's really out there, and working with your own imagination and your own, be really curious in terms of going out and finding out more about maybe a niche kind of area of design that sort of appeals to you. So going and finding out if that's out there and how they look to the rest of the world, and seeing if your look and feel is part of that. So just following up on anything that you wonder about. So we don't necessarily, we're not going to have access to all of the range of possibilities for you. So if you're curious about something, you get a sudden thought that, I wonder if that's out there, to go and explore and see if it is, and see if it resonates with you. So trying to kind of build on what you already have, because each of you has a really strong direction and background that is something that you want to build on. So being aware of what's out there is good, and bringing it back and sharing it with the class. So if you make discoveries, please bring them back and let us know about them. Unless, of course, you want to keep it secret, because you want to corner that market. But yeah. So just finding out about the ways that you might present yourself. So you want to think about type and the type of work that you want to do, and all of the style, symbols, color, all of that sort of thing that might reflect your personality, so it feels comfortable. So that's the part about kind of going inside and thinking about what you really like, and then going in and exploring that. And you might find a path that's less traveled that brings you some really good ideas. So follow up on your notions and curiosity, even if it seems like really weird or unusual. Honor that. So honor your imagination. So describing what you plan to or think you may produce or deliver. So that kind of goes with the territory of exploring all the ways that you would deliver something would be very different at um, some of the places we just looked at and maybe someplace around town here. So being able to recognize what it is that fits in with the place you would like to join is something that you want to look at a lot of examples so that you can start to get a sense of being able to distinguish all of those things. And so looking ahead, you want to take courses that will get you where you need to go. And some of those are at Cabrillo and some of those may be elsewhere. They may be online and they may be they may not be a whole course. It may be an event that could make the difference in terms of how you look at your work. And it could be one of those life-changing moments that we're sometimes blessed with, where everything sort of presents itself more clearly. We're not still tussling with different kinds of ideas, but we start to get a clearer picture of what we might want to pursue. So describe 3 modes of delivery you could use to, there are too many describes in that sentence. I'll have to fix that. To talk about your business to clients and customers, potential colleagues, and collaborators. So there are all of these different people you might be talking to. They might be an agency that's trying to help you get work so that you can help them earn money off you. Or it might be an independent thing. So all of these different ways of working. I know, Julie, you've done independent work and you've worked through agencies and various things. So sharing some of those experiences that you've had in retrospect, what you would have done.
Yeah.
All of that. So not all of us, but some of us have had experiences like that where we learned not to do certain things and learned to do others. So
Totally.
thinking about what professional organizations may be useful in determining how your portfolio should look. So we saw AIGA and we saw Graphic Artists Guild, and there are a bunch of others that are out there to serve designers so that you can they all have an interest in your finding work, so they're involved with the process. And in resources you've researched, is there advice about doing something you hadn't thought of before? So that's part of why we're here, is to discovery, for discovering things. So we've talked about this from the beginning, using your typography to speak in a way visually that looks and feels like you is what you also makes you look like a designer. So that a combination of things that may be unusual. Now there's some designers out there who are pretty wacky and they don't want to look like a serious, whatever you would call it, standard traditional designer. They want to look like somebody who has broken the mold and gone on and done kind of wild, crazy things. So if we discover anybody like that, we want to sort of bring them to the class and show show what they do, because there are some people who really do have a very different persona. And so we want to see all those examples. But as you're thinking about all of those, then you would be writing up a page and what a single page design and turning in the PDF by via email. Okay, so we've been a few places, and I think that probably now would be a good time for a break. I have a few little things. Yeah. So
Beth, why don't we ask for any questions on what
Yeah.
you've covered, and then we'll take a break. And most of you are muted, so remember to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Any questions?
I think I'm good for now.
good. Okay. So I'm going to go get another cup of tea. And
You're still sharing your screen, Beth, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I thought I'd bring these up here.
Okay.
Okay. So these are all things I found today. I mean, they were just happened to be. So you see a trend there? This is all by chance. So the one that I just found when we were looking at the sites, and then these are a couple. This is the color of the year, not the paint color of the year. The paint color of the year is a pale pink beige, white, but this is the color of the year now. It's sort of a Prussian teal that the people who do that come out with. And then this is another one, but there. So when you're thinking about your marks, you might want to know that some of these are a little bit closer together than then you want to differentiate yourself, make something unusual. So keep looking at those, but we'll be looking later at a company that tried very hard to differentiate or to change its logo, and well, that story's for later. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now and say hi, hi and bye.
Okay, so unless there's are there any further questions for now? Okay, then we will take a 10-minute break, and we will return at in 10 minutes. Okay. Take 10.
3, 2, 3. Okay.